All right, so let's dive right into this story. It's well, frankly, it's strange. It's unsettling, too.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the armed man arrested at a Trump rally,
Mm-hmm.
and I know what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard this story before, right?
Right. Mm.
But this time it's different. This time the story takes a wild turn because this guy claims he wasn't there to cause harm. He was there to support Trump.
Yeah. Mm.
He even insists that he's tight with the Trump family. Talk about a plot twist.
Yeah, it's definitely not your everyday headline. It's almost like something out of a movie. It gets even weirder, though, when you dig into the details, and it's more than just one man's actions. This actually exposes some of the concerning trends that we're seeing in society today, like misinformation conspiracy theories, and how those things can actually blur the lines between what's real and what people believe.
Okay, so who is this guy and what exactly did he do?
So his name is Vem Miller, and he was arrested on October 14th, 2024, near a Trump rally in Coachella, California.
Okay, so far that doesn't sound too unusual.
Right.
But then there's the police report.
Yeah, so the police report states that when they searched his vehicle, they found a loaded handgun, a shotgun ammunition. Not exactly standard rally gear.
Right.
And then to make things even more suspicious, they also discovered fake license plates and IDs with different names.
Now, okay, things just got a little more serious. So at this point, the police are thinking this could be a serious situation.
They are. In fact, the sheriff initially suspected a potential assassination attempt.
Wow.
But then Miller throws a curveball. He claims to be this diehard Trump supporter. He says he's practically best friends with the family. He's been to countless rallies. He even says he's worked with their media team. And he insists that all the weapons were just for self-defense, that he never intended to harm anyone.
Hold on. So we've gone from a potential assassination attempt to just a misunderstanding. That's a tough sell.
It really is. And this is where the story gets even more complicated. Miller has publicly identified himself as a sovereign citizen, which adds a whole other layer to this whole situation.
Okay, we have to unpack this sovereign citizen thing. What does that even mean, and how does it connect to everything else?
It's a fascinating ideology, but it's concerning. In a nutshell, sovereign citizens believe that they are not subject to U.S. laws. They often create their own identification documents, driver's licenses, even license plates because they don't recognize the government's authority to issue them. And this is an ideology that often leads to conflicts with law enforcement, and it's definitely something that authorities take very seriously.
So you're saying this guy who claims to be best buds with the Trumps, a loyal Republican, subscribes to an ideology that basically rejects the legitimacy of the U.S. government. Isn't that a contradiction?
It is a contradiction, and that's what makes Miller's story so intriguing. You have this self-proclaimed devoted Trump supporter, but on the other hand, you have his actions and this sovereign citizen identity, and they paint a very different picture. This contradiction raises a lot of questions about his motivations and the validity of his claims.
And the contradictions don't stop there. This is a man that was arrested with a car full of weapons. Since the arrest, he's released a video defending himself. And let's just say his story takes even more unexpected turns.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
This is where it gets interesting.
It does. To say the least, Miller doubles down on his claims of being a staunch Trump supporter since 2016. He says that he's been to tons of rallies and even claims that he worked on the media side for the Trump family. He name-drops Don Jr. Eric Trump.
Oh.
Even claims he met Trump himself.
Wait, at the premiere of Blade?
You guessed it, Blade 2 or Blade 3. He can't quite remember. I mean, of all the places to meet a future president, what are the chances?
It's definitely a detail that makes you go, huh. It almost seems too outlandish to be true. But it does make you wonder, is there any truth at all to his story? Or is this just a case of someone getting caught up in their own narrative?
So are you saying that there might be more to this story than meets the eye? That maybe this isn't just some guy who went down an internet rabbit hole?
Well, let's look at the evidence. When we examine Miller's social media, we do see photos of him with some prominent figures in conservative circles. There's a picture with Stephen Miller, another with Steve Bannon, and even a video of him with Don Jr. from the RNC this past July. It suggests that he does have some level of involvement in those circles, even if it's not as chummy as he claims.
Okay, so he's not a complete unknown in the Republican world, but how do you square that with the weapons, the fake IDs, the sovereign citizen ideology? It's like trying to force together pieces from entirely different puzzles.
It is a bit of a head-scratcher. That's the perplexing thing about this case, those conflicting pieces of information. On one hand, there's evidence suggesting some level of involvement in conservative politics, though perhaps exaggerated. On the other, you have this deeply rooted anti-government stance that clashes with being a devoted Republican, let alone a close confidant of a former president.
And let's not forget about the Blade premiere story.
Yeah.
Did that even happen as he describes?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Blade 2 came out in 2002 and Blade Trinity in 2004. I'm not a movie premiere expert, but a quick search doesn't exactly support his claim of this grand meeting with Trump at either of those events.
It's almost like the more you dig into his story, the stranger and more convoluted it gets. It's a blend of half-truths, exaggerations, and maybe even some outright fabrications.
And that's what's concerning about situations like this. It becomes increasingly difficult to separate fact from fiction. This is where it becomes crucial to understand the sovereign citizen movement in a larger context.
So we're left trying to understand what makes someone like Miller tick, what leads them to embrace this kind of contradictory worldview.
Yeah, it's a question without easy answers. But digging deeper into the sovereign citizen movement might give us some clues. It's important to remember it's not some fringe group with a single unified belief system. It's a really complex mix of anti-government sentiment, conspiracy theories, and often a distorted interpretation of legal concepts.
So there's a spectrum within the movement itself.
Absolutely. On one end, you have individuals who primarily just want to live off the grid, avoid taxes, that sort of thing. They might create their own IDs and documents, but they're not necessarily looking for a confrontation with the government or anything like that. Then there's the other end of the spectrum where things get a bit more concerning. These are individuals who might believe that they have complete immunity from any and all laws, and they may even engage in what they call paper terrorism, filing frivolous lawsuits and lay-ins against perceived enemies.
And those are the ones that tend to be on law enforcement's radar.
Precisely, because their beliefs can lead to dangerous standoffs and confrontations with authorities, and in some cases, it has escalated to violence.
You have to wonder, with the rise of misinformation and all these conspiracy theories online, are we seeing more people drawn to these fringe movements, especially when they start to intersect with more mainstream political ideologies?
It's a worrying trend. And Miller's case, with his claims of being a Trump supporter, while simultaneously espousing these anti-government views, seems to highlight that very intersection. It shows how someone can hold seemingly contradictory beliefs and how those contradictions can be fueled and amplified in these online echo chambers.
It's a reminder that the internet can be a very powerful tool for connecting people with shared interests, but also for spreading misinformation and pushing people towards more extreme viewpoints.
Absolutely. And it's really easy to get caught up in those echo chambers where your existing beliefs are constantly reinforced without any counter-narrative or any critical examination at all. That's one of the dangers of our current information ecosystem.
Okay, but bringing it back to Miller, what happens now? What are the legal ramifications of his arrest? And will he really try to sue the police as he's claimed?
Well, after his arrest, Miller was booked on multiple firearms charges, which is a very serious offense, especially considering the context of the situation. He was later released on $5,000 bail, but this isn't over for him legally. As for suing the police, it's not unusual for sovereign citizens to threaten legal action, but these lawsuits are often rooted in their own interpretations of the law and are rarely successful.
So it's more about making a statement than actually having a strong legal case.
Often, yes. It's a way of asserting their perceived sovereignty and challenging the authority of the courts.
That sounds like a legal system nightmare, to be honest.
It can be. It ties up resources and can be very frustrating for law enforcement who are just trying to uphold the law.
So what was the official response to Miller's arrest? Did the Trump campaign address any of this?
They did. The Trump campaign acknowledged that the incident happened and emphasized that they were monitoring the situation, but they also made sure to express their gratitude towards law enforcement for ensuring the safety of President Trump.
So reading between the lines, it seems like they're trying to distance themselves from Miller and this entire bizarre situation.
It definitely appears that way. Yeah, they're aware of him, but they're not exactly coming to his defense, which strategically is probably the smart move.
Probably, yeah. But it still leaves us with so many unanswered questions. Was Miller a legitimate threat to Trump, or was this just the misguided act of someone seeking attention? How much of his story is actually true? And what are we supposed to make of this strange intersection of pro-Trump sentiment and the sovereign citizen movement?
Those are the million-dollar questions. And the truth, as is often the case, is likely very complex and nuanced. It's easy to write off individuals like Miller as simply delusional or misguided. But I think this incident highlights a much larger societal issue. We're grappling with the spread of misinformation, the allure of conspiracy theories, and the increasing polarization of our political discourse.
And this case seems to be a microcosm of those larger trends.
Precisely. It forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about how these ideologies take root, how they can lead people down these dangerous paths, and how difficult it can be to separate fact from fiction in the digital age.
This is a lot to unpack. I mean, on the surface, you have this almost comical story of a guy claiming to be best friends with the Trumps, meeting them at a Blade premiere of all things.
Right.
But the deeper you go, the more troubling it becomes. And it reveals this undercurrent of extremism,
Yeah.
this misinformation, and the very real dangers they pose.
It does. It's easy to get caught up in those more, sensational aspects of the story, like you said. But I think at its core, this is a stark reminder of the challenges we face in an age where information, or should I say misinformation, spreads like wildfire.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, how do we navigate this? How do we discern truth from fiction, especially when someone is so convinced of their own narrative, even when it is just riddled with contradictions?
Right. That's the million-dollar question. And there's really no easy answer. But, for me, I think it starts with cultivating a healthy sense of skepticism. I think we can't just blindly accept information at face value, especially in the online world. We need to question our sources. We need to consider biases. We need to really look for evidence-based information.
It's like that old saying, trust but verify.
Exactly. And sometimes that means digging a little deeper, doing your own research, and seeking out diverse perspectives. I think it's also crucial to be aware of our own biases. We all have them, and they can definitely influence how we interpret information.
Yeah, it's about being willing to challenge your own assumptions too, and being open to the possibility that maybe we don't have all the answers.
Absolutely. And being willing to have those, respectful conversations with people who hold different viewpoints than our own. We're not always going to agree with everyone, and that's okay. But I think engaging in thoughtful dialogue, even when it's uncomfortable, is essential.
Yeah, I agree with that. So coming back to Vem Miller, what can we learn from this strange and unsettling incident?
Well, I think it underscores the importance of media literacy and critical thinking skills in today's world. I think it highlights the very real dangers of misinformation, how easily it can spread and how it can intersect with and potentially radicalize individuals who are already predisposed to certain ideologies.
It's a reminder that these aren't just abstract concepts, right?
Yeah.
This has real-world consequences.
Exactly. And it's not just about protecting ourselves from misinformation. It's also about recognizing the signs of radicalization in others, having those difficult conversations and perhaps even intervening before it's too late.
It's about looking out for each other and understanding that these issues are complex, they're multifaceted, there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. It requires a collective effort from individuals, communities, and institutions to really address the root causes of extremism and create a more informed and resilient society.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about today. This deep dive started with this bizarre headline, and it's taken us through this labyrinth of political extremism, misinformation, and the very nature of truth in the digital age.
It has. It's been quite a journey. And it just goes to show that sometimes the most, outlandish stories can actually reveal some profound truths about ourselves and the world that we live in.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. In an age where anyone can create their own narrative online, it's more important now than ever to be vigilant, to question everything, and to never stop seeking the truth, even when it's elusive. This is the deep dive reminding you to stay curious, stay informed, and never be afraid to ask the hard questions.